It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Crazy lady.
Oh, surprise, surprise. We've got a third co-host today.
And he's not just a co-host, he's a patron too. Welcome, Sebastian.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on. This is exciting. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's Friday morning and we're drinking. I mean, what's not to look forward to? So before we get into chatting with Sebastian and learning a little bit more about him, let's talk about what's in our glasses. Steph, what do you have?
I have an Arnese, okay? This one is the 2015 Fratelli Povero from Roero, and, you know, that's up there in the Piemonte. And this one I picked out at Supermarket Liquors because it was on my mind from Val's seminar, and I had been kind of drooling over all of those wines that she served. And I was like, why am I not drinking more Arnese? So I found this one, and it seriously is like less than $13. That to me is like, you got to get that. You have to get it. And it's got a cute little label and with this bird on it. And I'm kind of a bird freak. Yeah. And it makes for a very nice breakfast wine at 10:40 in the morning.
We were just kind of pre-gaming a little bit with Sebastian. We know he's got a Barbaresco in his glass, so he's going to tell us all about that.
Yeah, you know, anytime you can find an excuse to crack a bottle at 10:30 in the morning on Friday, you know you're having a good day. So, yeah, I'm drinking the Mario Garibaldi 2006 Barbaresco. I've been had this one in the chiller for a little while, saving it for special occasion, and I figured Wine to 5 is as special as it gets, so let's do it. So it's Barbaresco from 2006, and I like after about 8-9 years in the bottle, this vintage of Barbaresco starts getting this really nice forest floor and barnyard funk thing going on the nose, and it's a good way to wake up. And I think I'm just going to let this bottle sit open all day, and I'll save the rest of it for Brooke to have it at dinner later, because if I drink the whole thing myself, I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. And don't forget to send us a picture of that, and we'll put it in the blog so everybody can see what you were drinking as well. And
although, Sebastian, we would never tell anybody that you opened that. I mean, other than everybody who's listening, but we would never tell anybody. So maybe Brooke wouldn't know.
Not likely. Yeah, good luck.
Val, what have you got over there?
All right, so I went off the wall a little bit because I have something very strange open this morning. I have the Rothman and Winter Apricot Liqueur from Austria. And ooh. I know this is really a strange thing that I wanted to pick up because when we did the Austrian webinar or the SWE certification summit with, remember Lucia and Miss Jane, and we did this back in, gosh, I think it was June. I can't even remember now. I know it was before conference. But Jane did a little piece about the Marilène or the Wachau apricots or the Kloster Neuburger in the case of these. And I was literally drooling. And I got online immediately and found that K&L Liquors has some of this. They make an eau de vie or a brandy with these PDO apricots.
That reminds me of the limoncello talk when they had the protected lemon. Yes, okay.
Yes, they have protected produce. They've actually have to be, you know, so big and oval in shape and how many grams these apricots. So they make a brandy with them or an eau de vie. And then the case of this liqueur, they take the apricots and the juice and they combine it with the eau de vie. So the result is this very sweet, beautiful. I don't know if you see the color. I'll hold the bottle up. I don't have a whole lot in my glass. I'm just sipping it just to taste it. But look at the color. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And I'm just sipping a little bit of it. It's very
kind of looks
sweet.
like a rosé almost, you know.
It is. It's a beautiful copper color, yeah. So I don't know if they've added color to this or not, but they've taken the apricot juice. And the result, of course, is a very sweet liqueur at 24% alcohol by volume. Great before lunch and after coffee. So I just have like a tiny, maybe even a half-ounce sip because I have to be productive today. But it's fun to taste these kind of strange things.
Great before lunch. Let's go back to that part, Val. Great before lunch.
And after coffee. Yes, like I literally just finished my coffee like 30 minutes before I connected today. I was just finishing my second cup of coffee.
You know, the Italians The Italians have a saying, grappa mazza caffè, which, grappa cuts the coffee. So apricot liqueur will also mazza the caffè. So
it's almost like a caffè corretto.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, corrected coffee. So, but let's get into our chat with Sebastian, because, Steph and I, as most of you know, could just blah, blah, blah all day. So let's give some oxygen over to Sebastian.
Well, I can do the same. My day job, I'm in sales. So I kind of gab for a living. So feel free to reel me in anytime, because once I get going on the topic of Italy and wine, then I tend to forget I have a home and just keep talking. So definitely a threat there.
Well, we're going to put your bio in the blog, but why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you ended up here today?
Yeah, so I have been really lucky growing up. And when I say growing up, it's sort of in the ironic sense. I'm 42 now, so I've been at this a while. But I grew up the son of an artist, an art historian, and art teacher who infused in me pretty early on a sense of the importance of getting outside yourself and getting outside of your narrow perspective and experiencing something a little different. So because my father was an art teacher and art historian, he really had a lot of sense of the value of experiential education. And what he did in the mid-'80s was start an Italian exchange program for a private high school in Maryland, the high school that I went to. I was a faculty kid, and in the mid-'80s, these small, snooty private schools on the East Coast were extremely competitive with each other, and the school hired my old man to kind of found and upgrade the small art department they have to make it a little bit more competitive, because these schools want to compete for students, and having a stronger art program really helps. So the next thing they said, I was like, all right, Doug, good job on the art department. Now, what's the next thing we should do to kind of raise the bar here at Severn School? And I said, well, you need to have a student exchange. So that's one thing that you're missing, and you really got to have that. So starting in the mid-'80s, he started taking students for 3 weeks to a month over to Italy, and they would spend most of the month of February in Italy, experiencing Rome, Florence, Venice, and some smaller towns, and staying with Italian high school students. And then you would have those Italian students the next fall come over and stay with the American students that went over. So you've got these lifelong friendships that are formed by these kids going over and just experiencing living in Italy. And instead of just, seeing 6 cities in 7 days on a tour bus, these kids were spending a month living in Italy and living with an Italian family. And everybody who did it, every one of my high school classmates, and for 30 years, every kid who did it reports that it was singularly the most impressive and most important thing they did in their entire high school careers. I mean, do you remember what your final grade was in English in the 11th grade? Most people probably don't, but you probably do remember spending 3 weeks living with a family on the other side of the planet in a completely different culture. And the best way I can explain that feeling to you is when this program first started up. I remember some Italian kids, and the first exchange would have been 86 or 87. These Italian kids come over, and they're all having fun and enjoying Severn School, and I got to meet them, and I was a wee lad at this point, and I said, hey, Dad, do you think these Italian kids wish that they were Americans like me? And my dad just looked at me and smiled and said, son, I think they think it's pretty darn cool to be Italian. And that was a mind-blowing moment. Like, wow, you can have a sense of civic pride and a sense of appreciation for your culture, and you don't have to be an American. And that sounds like a trivial thing to us today in this modern, globally connected internet world. But for a kid in 1986 who's 11 years old and is not exposed to the outside world, that was a real mind-blowing moment for me to realize that there's perspectives out there that you have no way of knowing about until you actually go get in them and see them. And experiential education is the thing that really sticks with you. And a lot of that is, I think, tied to smell, taste. You might not remember every detail of one of my old man's art history lectures when you're standing there in the Uffizi, but you're going to remember the taste of, that plate of pasta you had at lunch afterwards. You're going to remember the wine you had at dinner, afterwards. That's the sort of the way memory is tied to experience and tied to taste and smell and sounds, and how those can trigger memories. That, I think, is one of the more interesting aspects of travel. Is you might forget the details. I don't remember what year Michelangelo was born, but I can tell you what the wine was like, the last meal I had in Italy. And that kind of experiential education is something that was impressed upon me at a pretty early age. So I consider myself really fortunate, because there's not a whole lot of kids that could say they'd been to Italy twice by the time they were 17. And that really stayed with me in my adult life. And so that was sort of my father's legacy. He spent 30 years doing this. And then when he retired from teaching in 2012, I pointed out to him, I said, Dad, have you ever noticed that all of these students that go over, all their parents are always asking you to take them next? And a lot of the people that you just sort of on the side are taking on summer break, on Christmas break, you're kind of sort of already doing this ad hoc. Why don't you make this be your retirement avocation and just enjoy your retirement by sharing this encyclopedic knowledge of Rome, Florence, and Venice that you've built up over the last 30 years, and share it with people. I mean, the way I phrased it was, I think you've got a duty to the world to share this with people. So that was sort of over the back porch in Maryland one summer, we're having dinner, and I just popped this on Dad. Said, "Hey, Dad, now that you're retired, we're kind of having a celebration dinner. Let's go set up a website and just start taking people to Italy."
Well,
So
can you back up a little bit?
No, I covered a lot of ground there, didn't I?
No, I wanted you to back up a little bit because obviously you're Italian, and the art historian and the arts, of course, make sense with Florence, whatever, because that's a very big art city. A lot of students go there to study at the Medici School or the Florence University Arts or what have you. So is that why Italy was the first cultural exchange with this private school, or is there another reason?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that was, I mean, it made sense. If you're the artist and the art historian and the chairman of the art department, and they say, hey, what country should you set up a student exchange with? I mean, your choices are Italy, Italy, and Italy. Because, I mean, 25% of the world's art treasures are in Rome and Florence. So, everything that's recognized by UNESCO as an art treasure, like fully a quarter of it is in Rome and Florence. So you kind of need to be there. And that definitely made sense. And that's not to slight the art treasures found in other countries, but in terms of concentration of just that experiential education that I was talking about, it's really hard to beat Italy in terms of getting students outside their comfort zone a little bit, going to a culture where there's a different language, a different food culture, it's just different enough to make it really challenging to the students, but at the same time, it's something that you can really relate to, especially if you're studying art and art history. It kind of draws it all together. You can talk about the Colosseum, you can talk about the David, and you can see it in a textbook, but then when you have Doug standing there talking to you about it firsthand and you're looking at it, that's there's no comparison in terms of the heft of that experience. So Italy definitely made sense, and there was never really any doubt.
When you're back on the porch celebrating your dad's retirement and you're now proposing this encore career for him, where did you guys come up with, okay, so Sebastian, your last name's Sassi, okay? And I just think it's so cute because if people don't know that it's Italian, they're just thinking sassy, So I'm going to
always explain to people that I'll spell it out to people and they still insist on putting a Y at the end. I'm like, no, sassy it's actually the Italian word for rocks. So you'll see signs up in the north. You'll see cadute sassy, falling rocks. So
I didn't know that. How cool
that's
is that?
Actually, so a masso is a big rock and a sasso is smaller as a stone. So it means it's falling stones. So yeah. So
you're like Sassy Italy tours. You're like, this sounds good. Let's get a website. Let's get going on this.
It sounds
How
like
did that
cool
happen?
Icebreaker now. I mean, it's the name is it's an icebreaker now. It makes me sound kind of unique. There actually is another Sebastian Sassi on the planet. He found me on Facebook once. He lives in Uruguay, and I was devastated. I realized I have to go have this guy assassinated because now there can be only one. Okay, but no. But yeah, it's a very unusual name, and in a business sense, it's very useful because people remember me. But I got beat up a lot when I was a kid because I grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland in the middle of corn country, and everybody's name was Wayne or Dwayne or some combination of Wayne and Dwayne, and they all wanted to beat me up because my name was Sebastian Jacques Sassi. I was a weirdo. So it was rough then, but it's a useful icebreaker now. Yeah, I mean there certainly will only ever be one Sassy Italy tour, so it's a very unique moniker, and I've grown to love it. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Did you have to convince your dad a lot? Was it very difficult to get him to?
He was going to be taking people just word of mouth that he knew from being a teacher for 30 years. And he was going to once or twice a year have somebody call him up and be like, hey, Doug, I want to take my family to Rome and Venice and I want to see, the lake region. Let's go. That was going to happen once or twice a year, no matter what. So that's not enough to keep the guy busy. So how do I keep him busy, a lot more than that? I want the guy going over there 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times a year. How do I do that? Well, you gotta have a website, you gotta have a social media presence. And so that was the piece that I kind of took over. So my father's clearly a genius when it comes to art history. He's not an entrepreneur. So that's my angle. In a sense, we're sort of a classic, Renaissance family in that. So I'm the eldest of three brothers. So I'm the guy that handles the family biz. And then my younger brother, Raphael, is an amazing artist. He's the classical portrait artist, and he's an amazing artist. And then my youngest brother, Daniel, is a police officer. So you got the carabiniero, you got the artist, and you got the guy running the family business. And that is the exact order it would have been in Renaissance. So if we were the Medici, it would be the same. Medici had a bit more money than we do, but we're a classic Renaissance family in that sense. Yeah.
So where does the wine come into the picture? Because that's where we actually connected, other than the fact it's a cultural tie-in with the Italian lifestyle. But where does this come in? Because you guys are very big into the wine.
Let's cut to the chase, because I'm sure your listeners are going, why the heck are you guys talking to this geek who's just geeking out on Italy? So so let me tie this back to wine for you. And that kind of ties into wine tourism generally, I think, is one of the things we want to talk about today. So when you think about Italy and you think about wine, it's always sort of kind of been one of those adjuncts you couldn't help but experience. So you're there, you're in Rome, Florence, Venice, you're going out to dinner, you're going to have wine. And it's sort of an adjunct to the experience that's always going to kind of be there. For me, it's always been more than that. There's a nexus between culture and wine and civilization and wine that's always fascinated me. So in my adult life, when I started saying, it's time for me to quit drinking the stuff that college guys drink, let's start learning more about wine, I started realizing that there's this nexus between wine culture, between being a vintner and civilization, and you can trace wine back as far back as you can trace everything else about Italian history. Wine's always kind of been there. So I wanted to learn more just about it generally. So I kind of became a wine geek in my 20s and 30s. And I realized that wine always is one of the most exciting parts of any trip to Italy for me. So I realized that we needed to have something to do for our customers besides run you through the Uffizi and the Colosseum and the Roman Forum and the Grand Canal in Venice. How do we make that wine experience be a little bit of a deeper experience? And I started just doing some research, and I started looking at the wines that I really liked, because you could spend a lifetime exploring Italian wine and not learn it all. There's no way everybody's going to ever know it all. So I thought, well, let me pick a couple of regions that I really like, and now I'm going to dig in and get to know some winemakers there. So the reason I'm drinking this bottle, in fact, is I just kind of threw a dart at the map and said, well, one of my favorite producers is this Garibaldi group over here in a little town called Rodello, Italy. And Rodello is a little town of about 500 people on a hillside overlooking Alba in Piemonte. And I said, this is cool wine. I really like their stuff. I wonder where this stuff is made. So I've been drinking this stuff for years. I better learn more about it. So I threw a dart at the map and found Rodello on Google Maps. And I actually did a blog post years ago on our blog about finding it from a 10,000 foot view and then drilling in and looking at it from 1,000 feet above and then drilling in and seeing the street view of where this wine that I'm drinking, like, where does it come from? And that was another one of those kind of aha moments. Like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I'm developing this connection to where my wine comes from. We live in this globalized culture where a lot of times you don't have a lot of connection. Like, do you know where the hamburger patty you ate last night came from? Where did that cow eat? You probably have no idea. We don't live in a culture that is designed to give you that kind of connection to your food at all. So I wanted to buck that trend and kind of be a counter-revolutionary, and the revolution that we're countering is the Industrial Revolution. So how do we get ourselves a little bit more connected to what it is we're drinking and make your experience in Italy be a deeper experience? And that was kind of the trigger for me to start drilling in on a bunch of these wineries that I liked, and let's just find them. And then so I would write blog posts like that and then actually email them off to the winemaker. And I didn't think anything of it. And then one day I walk into my favorite wine store there in Colorado Springs, and my buddy's over there at Sovereignty Wines, and I'm picking up another bottle of Garibaldi Dolcetto, and I'm going to have this with dinner. And Ivars, the guy behind the counter.
Yeah,
says,
shout out to Ivars.
Ivars says, dude, what did you do? And I was like, what do you mean? He says, I just got this frantic call from Piemonte asking who is this American who has discovered us, and nobody's ever written a blog post about us before, and how the heck did this guy even find us? And can you tell him to come visit? And I was like, all right, sold. So here I go. So that was years ago, and that was one of those experiences where I'm like, look at this connection I've made. Somebody that I never in a million years would have met these people any other way. They're a little winery that makes 100,000 bottles of wine a year on a hillside overlooking Alba. Nobody's ever heard of them, but I found them, and I found them on Google. and on Google Maps, and I found them by way of forging that experiential connection. So I'm experiencing the wine. Now I want to go experience it over there in the country. And I realized that is a deeper kind of experience. And you're not going to find an experience like that and by the way, fast forward, years later, and these people are friends of the family for life. And, and they're some of my best friends in the world. And I only get to see them when I'm over there. But you know what? The connection, the friendship I have with these people is just, you're never going to forge a friendship like that any other way. And that is, for me, that kind of deeper experience. So what I want to do is share experiences like that with other people. So I don't want to be just for me, just because I'm a wine geek. I want other people to have experiences like that, because frankly, there's not a tour bus in the world that's going to get you an experience like that. The only way you're ever going to have an experience like that and forge those kinds of friendships with somebody in a completely different culture is to get over there and get, dig your boots into the soil and go experience it. And that's the kind of thing that I want to share with people. It's hard to encapsulate that in a bumper sticker slogan. There's no way for me to come up with a Facebook post or a blog post that's going to fully explain that feeling. You just got to get over there and go meet some of these people and live among them for a week or two and just experience their culture. And that nexus between civilization and winemaking and artisanal winemaking particularly, and not so much industrial winemaking, and the way that it makes you feel and the psychological connection you develop with a place when you go meet people like this is so much different than being part of, you and 55 of your best friends you never met jumping on a tour bus and driving past the Coliseum. That's apples and hand grenades. It's not even the same experience. So that's the kind of experience that I want to share with people. And so what I figured out here is what we do it is kind of unique in that I've got this guy who's an art history expert who can talk you a blue streak. If you want to know why the bricks on Strada Nova in Venice are a particular color, he's going to be able to tell you. And then if you want to go find out where the wine you're drinking came from, I'm going to be able to show you. And that's kind of what we want to do, is just share that with people. I recognize that we're never going to make $1 million doing this. This is really not about money. It's really about just how do we get more people to be a little bit more engaged with the world around them. And this is just one way of doing it. So I have no illusions that what we're doing is curing cancer, but I think every person who experiences in a deep way, that deep psychological connection to another country, you're making the world a brighter place just by way of doing that. And that's
when was the first time you took people to a winery and switched things up a little bit?
There've been some off and on wine tours. People would want to go see a winery early on. My first visit to an Italian winery was in 1989, so I was 14. That was my first ever wine buzz. When I was 14 years old. So that was sort of off and on. But this would have been around 2013 when I said, Dad, it's cool that you are the Rome, Florence, Venice expert of the world, but I'm never going to be able to recreate your mind in my mind. I got a day job. I've got kids. I don't have time to become the art history expert of the world. There's no way I'm ever going to do it. So I want to carry on this legacy. So when you're too old to still do this, I still want to take people to Italy, but I'm not going to ever be the Rome, Florence, Venice guy that you are. So let's start around 2013. Let's start focusing a little bit on wine tours, and let's start introducing some of our winemaker friends to some of our customers, and start just saying, hey, when we're done with Venice, let's grab a train ride through Lugano. Let's go meet a couple of our friends in Lugano, and let's take some people to Piemonte and start offering that as an adjunct to your amazing tours of Venice, Dad. And he kind of gave me the thumbs up and said, that's the legacy. It's he's the art history guy. I'm never going to be that guy. I enjoy art history. It's great. But now let's go drink some wine. So it's over the last few years, it's sort of slowly but surely taking this ship and turning it towards let's go be wine geeks in Friuli or Piemonte. And that's, and the other piece of that I really like is the wine regions that are closest to my heart are the ones that are probably the most undervisited ones. If you think about it, we get a lot of people writing in saying, hey, next Tuesday I'm going to be in Chianti country. Where should I go see? And I'm like, I don't know. Throw a dart at a map. You can't go wrong. But why are people going places like that? Why are those places so overrun? They're overrun because there's movies about them, there's books about them, and it's, oh, by the way, it's a half an hour car ride from Florence. So I want to kind of get people a little bit further out of that comfort zone. And so when I really started digging into places like Friuli and Piemonte, I realized that I would go there and nobody speaks English and nobody sees any Americans, and you can be in a town and be the only American around. And I think that's really cool. And I think that is awesome.
Okay, so let's go back to some more wine gabbing. And I'm really curious about your relationship with the Wine Fathers and how did that partnership come about?
Cool.
Who are the Wine Fathers?
Who are the Wine Fathers?
Tell everybody about that first.
Le due Luca. Luca and Luca. So Luca Latronico and Luca Comello, a couple of friends of mine who live in the Udine area. So they live in the Friuli Venezia Giulia region, which for those that aren't familiar is the region of Italy kind of to the north of the Veneto. So it's sort of the foothills of the Dolomites in northeastern Italy. And it's a fascinating place, and it's one of those underdiscovered, undervisited regions of Italy that certainly deserves more tourism than it gets. And just doing research on the place, I came across on social media. God, social media wastes so much of our time. But there are good things that come out of it. So I met these guys on social media, and they actually, I think they just friended us on Twitter, or followed us on Twitter, and I started talking to these guys on Facebook, and I said, that's a really cool project that you have in mind. So the Wine Fathers is a project where they have set up a website where they collect donations for differing levels of partnership with an artisanal winemaker in a less discovered part of Italian wine country, where you can actually, depending on how much you donate, you're just a friend of the winery, or you can actually have a row of vines in the winery named after you. And if you spend enough money, you can actually get a few nights to stay at the winery and get free cases of wine delivered to you. So they're just encouraging people to make donations and develop partnerships with winemakers. And it might not seem like a lot, but for some of these guys that are trying to salvage a variety of grapes that is dying out or being uprooted in favor of something that's easier to sell to the American market, or somebody that is trying to rebuild an ancient winery that has fallen into disrepair, or something like that. So they find these small winemakers that maybe only make 10 or 20 or 30,000 bottles of wine a year, and they collect donations for them and get people to be partners of the winery. And it's a really, really cool concept that they have. And I said, hey, I want to promote that, so I'm putting a link to that on my website, absolutely. And oh, by the way, would you start introducing me to some of your winemakers? And so I developed this friendship with these guys, and Luca and Luca are awesome. And I would say that they're doing what you would refer to colloquially as they're doing God's work for winemakers that are really small and are trying to just survive and thrive in a market that really doesn't value what they do necessarily as much as it should. So they're drawing attention to winemakers that are really small, really artisanal. I mean, these are guys that are making wine in amphorae buried in the ground, and and ancient techniques for winemaking. These are guys that are operating 10-hectare wineries in places in Italy that you've never heard of and that I've never heard of. I mean, in remote places, and they're really cool. So if you get a chance, definitely check out winefathers.com and take a look at the projects that they're working on, how they're helping winemakers that frankly are just underserved by the wine consuming market, and helping them get some attention and get some funds. It might not seem like a lot, but a few $1,000s here and there goes a long way for an artisanal Italian winemaker who's trying to get a project off the ground. And so
I think it makes a lot of sense, because then people are feeling really connected in a very meaningful way with wine and culture and people. And so it reminds me in a way of, I think it was like 6 years ago, one of my neighbors was turning 75, and he's a huge lover of anything Italian. And I'm like, what do you get this guy who's like a retired attorney at 75 years old? I mean, there's no gift that you can really get him, And he was buying, a 75-year-old port, vintage port for himself, and I'm like, what am I going to get you? And I ended up, I mean, this kind of a thing, like getting him something like from the Wine Fathers, he would have loved that. But like, a row of vines or something, but along those lines, I had bought him, I found, what was it? Il Palazzone winery in Montalcino had olive trees that you could put your name on it or
Aw.
give it as a gift.
Love it.
And then you would get the olive oil that came from that tree. And I thought, oh my gosh, my neighbor is going to think this is the coolest gift ever. Like, he has his own tree with his own name on it, and he's going to get the olive oil and everything, from the herb tree,
Aw.
and
That's so cool.
and it was so cool. He loved it so much. He got this whole certificate and everything. And that's just, it reminds me of what the Wine Fathers are doing, because now you feel connected to this place, to something that's, it's a growing business. It's a growing agricultural thing. It's with real people. And for somebody who, needs an extra special gift, which is more experiential than anything else, this is perfect.
It's, you can have a friend go over to Italy and they can come back and bring you a T-shirt from the Rialto market in Venice, or they can get you, an instant friendship with somebody that is trying to preserve ancient wine culture and the old ways of doing things in Italy. And I think that, to me, that's the better gift for anybody that is of wine drinking age and anybody that's interested in wine culture. Is let's start getting people from other countries connected to these people that are trying to preserve a way of life that in this modern globalized era is sort of fading away. And I think these guys are also the same kind of counter-revolutionary, and that revolution being the Industrial Revolution. These guys are similar sorts of counter-revolutionaries to us. And so I felt an instant kinship with these guys. I was like, that is cool. That's really cool that you're pushing back on this industrialization of winemaking and trying to make it viable for people that don't want to do that. Not that there's anything wrong with drinking wines from, big producers. If that bottle, that jug of a bowl of wine is what makes you feel good, if you want to have a Castello Chianti tonight, knock yourself out. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. There's nothing wrong with those people. I want those companies to make money, but I also want that little guy on the hillside in Friuli who's got 15 acres. I want that guy to be able to survive, and I want that guy to be able to thrive, and I want people to know that he's there. And that is the mission of the Wine Fathers, and that's why I'm going to continue to promote what they're doing. And I'm a big fan of what they're doing, and I would encourage everybody to, if you can find a way to, spend what you would spend on Starbucks in a month, making a donation to an Italian winemaker that you're never going to have ever heard of it otherwise in a million years. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Is it as good as maybe getting on a plane and going over and seeing them? Probably not, but it's something. It's a way to start your love affair with an artisanal Italian winemaker. I think that's the way to do it. So, and I have many of these love affairs. So, absolutely.
This is another way for not everybody can get on a plane and go somewhere, physically, financially, or otherwise. So this is a great way to be involved with developing culture that technology is letting us do now that we couldn't do before, and experience something that somebody who maybe can't travel for whatever reason couldn't do before. So I really like this aspect of e-culture and how you can become involved with something, whether it's wine or anything. So I would like to see more proliferation of that. But I'd also love to hear your embarrassing wine story, Sebastian. Go ahead and lay it on us.
All right. Oh boy, I know you guys try to keep the show fairly G-rated compared to some other podcasts, but I'm going to go out on a limb here, and this is deeply embarrassing. So I'm opening my heart to the world here. So when I was 14, I told you about my trip to Italy in 1989, and so my old man has me over there, and got to experience a little bit of wine culture. I had my first visit to an Italian winery, and I was with some older students. So I was in 8th grade at the time, but most of the kids on this trip were 10th, 11th, 12th grade kids, and they're throwing back a pretty good amount of wine because it's Italy, and there's no drinking age, and I'm gonna have wine with dinner and then having a good time. So our next to last night there, the lady that hosted me threw a party for all the American kids and a lot of the Italian kids. And so you can imagine, me when I was 14, I had more hair, but a lot less muscle, and I was a scrawny little kid. And so I'm about 6 or 7 ounces of wine into the party, and I'm pretty tipsy at this point. So as a 14-year-old kid, two of these American girls noticed that I'm very enamored of this Italian girl who's at the party, and I'd spent most of the trip hanging out with this Italian girl, and I liked her very much. And she was older than me, and I was a lonely American boy who's got these doe eyes for this Italian girl. So Colleen and Kathy notice this, and they start picking on me, and they start tickling me a little bit. And they tickle me some more, and eventually they're holding me down on the floor, and I'm like, get off me. And I had had enough wine, and between that and the tickling, a rather embarrassing bodily function was go. So I'm having this embarrassing moment right in front of this Italian girl that I'm madly in love with, who's like at 17. And like if I could have crawled into the floor and disappeared between the floorboards and never come out, I would have. So can't believe I just shared that story with thousands of people. But yeah, so that would be my most embarrassing wine moment. So, and believe me, it wasn't a whole lot of wine I drank, but it was enough. And,
well, when you're a teenager too, a lot of that stuff isn't controllable. So that's
hit me.
Part of it. Yeah.
And it was very embarrassing. So
excellent.
I'm going to pour another glass of wine here. Jeez.
That's right. Here, let's drink to that story, Sebastian. Cheers.
Cheers. Yes. That's awesome. Oh my goodness, I love it.
I love that. That's great.
I shared that story, but yeah,
that's good.
So Colleen, Kathy, wherever you are, get lost.
Yeah, no kidding. I wonder whatever happened to them or the Italian girl.
Yeah, I went back to Italy again a couple of years later, and it went out and had a cup of coffee with her. And
oh, you did?
Oh yeah, I always stayed in touch with you. Back then, we didn't have email. Back then, we didn't have Facebook, but. In the early 90s, no, we wrote letters all the time. And I think she wanted to stay in touch. And she's like, you should come over here and run off with me. And I was like, that's the perfect fantasy for every high school boy who's been to, right? It's have some Italian girl want you to run off with her. But now my parents insisted I go off to college. So, yeah.
Darn it.
Oh, well.
Oh, the one that, yes.
The one that got away.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Drink more wine. Cool. I think we should take a little detour from the wine talk, and we're going to lay this factoid on you about rum from Martinique, okay? And this came up on my radar because of the seminar I took at the SWE conference. And so I got to taste some of the Rhum Agricole de Martinique, and it actually has its own AOC. So this is why I think this is geeky and cool. Okay. It was created in 1996 for the rums from the island of Martinique. And for anybody who's wondering, where is that and what is she talking about? Martinique is in the Caribbean, and it's north of St. Lucia. And it is a French island. And it is part of the EU. They speak French there and Creole. And they use euros and all of that. So it's a totally French place. And what is regulated for this AOC is that it has to be sugarcane juice that's fresh from that island, fermented and distilled. And they are really strict about the cane variety, the production, the extraction, the aging, the storing, anything you can imagine, just like they do with French wine. So in order for it to have the stamp of approval and have the AOC on there. And there's actually 3 different categories. So there's the Martinique Blanc, which is the white rum. There's the Martinique Élevé sous bois, which is a golden or amber colored. And that is required to have 12 months in oak barrel. And then the third category is kind of broken down into a few subcategories, but it's the Vieux Agricole. So it's the old or aged rum. And to have a VO, it has to be a minimum of 3 years in oak. VSOP has to be a minimum of 4 years in oak. And then either vintage dated or the XO has to be 6 years, up to 6 years. So I thought that was kind of cool. It was the strongest rum I have ever had. Oh my goodness. It was really intense, but I thought that was really geeky and fun. And I wasn't sure if you guys have had it. So I was like, maybe you guys would be interested in some of this information. I'm very interested in that
because I've recently discovered that rum is kind of like wine in that there's as much difference between a Barbaresco and a box wine as there is between, the rum behind the counter at the gas station in the small bottles and like an aged rum like that. There's a huge world of rum, and it's actually a pretty fascinating beverage. So I love that factoid.
True.
Yeah.
See if you guys can find some in the springs.
Excellent.
That was kind of Wino Radar also, but I'm sure there's more.
It was kind of Wino Radar.
Yeah.
I think, Sebastian, you kind of led on to some kind of radar that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so I've been talking with my buddies over there at the Wine Fathers. I've been inspired by many wine books to realize that we need, there's a good market that's underserved for, let's get some knowledge out there for people. And so I've been talking to the Wine Fathers guys. We're going to start doing some research, and we're going to put together a book about Friulan winemakers. So start writing about the wine history of Friuli, and I just want to get to do some more research and get to know some more of those winemakers and combine photography and just their stories. And let's the Wine Fathers and I are going to start working on a book to memorialize what some of these Friulan winemakers are doing. And I'm really excited about that. So I'm gonna start looking into becoming an author.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I love that. Val, what's on your radar?
Well, this is kind of odd. I've touted the money that I've saved on Coravin. Remember when I was happened to open, 12 bottles at once or whatever for tasting practice. And yet for things like screw cap bottles, I used either the Vacuvin or the Vineyard Fresh or something like that to keep the bottles longer. But now, apparently, and I didn't know this till I saw an article recently by Blake Gray, Coravin has released some screw cap adapters. Now, I did a little just poking around initially. I think it was just came out. Oz Clarke did an article about them, and and some people still aren't convinced the Coravin is you have to open a lot of bottles with natural cork to have a reason to have a Coravin because of what it costs, to refill with the capsules. So when I had to open several $60 bottles at once, Coravin came in handy for that, pretty much paid for itself. But it's not for everybody. Same thing with the screw cap adapters. I see it, being of use maybe in a restaurant, in a wine by the glass program. So basically this adapter, and I'll attach a couple articles so you can see what they're saying about it. You put the adapter onto a screw cap bottle and allows the needle to go into this material and come out without leaving a hole, essentially. So that way, let's say you have, like we had on last week's podcast, the whip, the white wine. That bottle is $20-$30, isn't it, if I remember correctly?
I think it's like 24 or something. Yeah.
So for some people, that's a big spend. That's a big spend for me on a white wine too. So let's say I was opening a couple bottles in that price point to study for an exam. It would behoove me to have some really good preservation system where the argon gas can be released into the bottle and lay over and create that coating. So I'm kind of curious about it. I don't know if anybody out there's tried it, but if you've got an opinion on the screw cap adapters, and if you do open a lot of bottles, I'm kind of curious about it. So that's kind of on my wino radar. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make the spend, but
maybe use the Vineyard Fresh.
Yeah,
instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
I'm wine geeky enough to want to learn more about that. It's an interesting topic, but I've never really had a need for wine preservation around our house.
No, when you're, like I said, only when I started to open 8 to 16 bottles at a time. And then it was kind of like, you can only do so many Save Our Liver parties and get your friends together to drink all this wine. But when you're opening things from Barolo to Burgundy, honestly, you don't want to waste money and you just want a glass. No. That's where those kind of things come in handy. So
absolutely.
I see both sides of it. I'm one of those people that's like, oh, yeah, I see both sides. I see why you wouldn't want to waste your money. Just use Vineyard Fresh, which I've always used, or Vacuvin, and then there's arguments for everything. So it's all about your preference, and that's the thing about wine.
Yeah.
But what about you, Steph?
I have never seen the Barolo Boys film, and so that is on the docket for me. I am now probably going to watch it tonight or in the next couple of days, because you had mentioned it to me, and I was like, how have I not? I try and keep up with all of the wine movies, but this one somehow escaped me, so I'm going to check this one out.
That is a great watch, and I can tell you, having met her, you see a lot of Kiara in that, and she's so cool. She is every bit like, when you meet her in person, she's just like the person you see in the movie. There's no fake facade about her. I mean, she is just such an awesome person.
On the Barolo Boys, I have to thank Suzanne, because we mentioned it in our seminar on Piemonte about the book that she did, and the next day she came up with a copy of the DVD and gave it to me. Yeah. I don't even know where she got it. I'm like, where the hell did you get this? We're at this hotel kind of in the, not in the best part of town. And I'm like, would you like schlepp on down to Target? I still don't know where she came up with it out in this hotel with nothing around it. But
I'm not surprised she has a copy on her at all times.
But I have to give Suzanne a shout out and thank you for that copy of the Barolo Boys. That's so sweet. And I still haven't even watched it. It's been so crazy since I've been back. But
I think I know what you guys need to do tonight. It's definitely a really good watch. And there's a reason she gave that DVD. You definitely need to watch it. It's a really fascinating story.
Yeah, I have house guests, and we've been entertaining a couple nights, so I'm kind of like, once I get things calmed down and I have a minute to open a Barolo and watch it together with the movie, then that would be great. But I really want to give it attention. I don't want to rush it. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what about shout outs? So we kind of rolled into shout outs here. Steph?
Yeah. I have a shout out. Shout out to my friend Cheryl, and also to this beautiful bottle of Method Champenois sparkling wine that she brought back from her trip to Lake Chelan, Washington. And it's from the winery Karma Vineyards. And yes, we opened this beautiful bottle while we were getting our glow-in-the-dark body paint on for some fundraiser. Seriously, I know. Who does that? Who does body paint? Well, anyway, it was a first for me, and it was quite the fundraiser. I think they ended up raising like $160,000 that night, which was great. Anyhow, we had this 2012, and they call it Brut de Brut at Karma Vineyards, and it was so outstanding. And Cheryl said it was exactly how she remembered it when she tasted it at the winery. So isn't that what we're always going for? Like recreating that special moment when you first tasted that wine. And it's really hard to do sometimes because, you're like, it doesn't taste the same as when I was there, or it's just not as exciting. And so when we poured the glass and we're getting all kind of our pre-party on, she's like, this is exactly how I remember it. And it's so beautiful. And I was just loving on it. And we had some roasted hazelnuts from Oregon, and they were so perfect with this bubbly. So
nice.
Shout out to Karma. Yeah.
Nice.
Sebastian, what's your shout out?
I definitely want to give a shout out to my brother Rafe. You can check him out at Sassy Drawing on Twitter, and that's Sassy with an I, not a Y. So he does he actually does art education for us. So if anybody's interested in actually learning to draw from the masters, to go over to Italy and actually go into a museum and learn how to sketch and draw, he can actually arrange that. So we've done that for folks, and he does art education for people that want to learn. So definitely check him out on Twitter. So shout out to him, and shout out to my friends Valerie and Evan over in Alba. So they're our tour partners over there. So if I ever get a call like, hey, I'm going to be in Alba next Tuesday, can you line me up a wine tour? Obviously nothing I can do to help you, but I kicked those folks over to Valerie and Evan, and they do a great job for folks, and a lot of our customers have said nothing but good things about them, and they're just awesome people, and I just love hanging out with them anytime I'm in Piemonte. So you can check out Valerie's blog at girlsgottadrink.com. So, she's awesome.
I love the name.
Yeah. One of these days you got to meet her. She's really awesome. So they're cool folks. So shout out to them as well.
All right. First of all, cool name, Val, and Girls Gotta Drink. And I hope your brother never sees my Instagram account because I post pictures of my swear word coloring book that Steph gave me, and I never color inside the lines. So those are some cool.
Yeah, we're all about drawing outside the lines.
Yeah.
Right. And your shout out, Val?
And my shout out is to K&L Wine Merchants. So when I'm not buying here locally, I'm ordering the weird stuff online. That's where this Apricot Liqueur came from, as well as my recently acquired bottle of Redbreast Loose Style Edition Irish whiskey, which I could not find anywhere in town. The Alsace Single Malt, which I am loving right now. It's an Alsace whiskey, a single malt that's aged in either like Von Joan barrels or something weird like that. It's ridiculous. And then all the funky French fringe wines that came in this week. So I've been searching for Redbreast Loose Style, no kidding, for over a year. Have not been able to score it here in town. I've asked everybody I went to, even when I go out of town and I poke into different stores, maybe they have the Redbreast Loose Style. I even checked in Rome. Nope. But I love how K&L stocks a great variety. I can get anything delivered to my door with reasonable shipping prices. I sound like a commercial, but I love them. I love their newsletter. I love their sales. They have auctions. You can get your 75-year-old port, and they have insider advantages and total freaking shout out. Love, love, love. On to Patreon love, Steph?
Yeah, let's do the Patreon love, because our patrons are who support us, and this is a listener-supported show. So we definitely want to give extra shout-out love to Sebastian today for being here with us. And we finally got all of our schedules coordinated, which was awesome. Very cool. And we do look forward to having a in-person cheers with you sometime soon.
Yeah, we definitely need to. That would be cool.
Definitely, definitely. We want to thank everybody here with our part of our Patreon pack, our Tenacious Tasters, Jeff E. from We Like Drinking podcast, Lynn from Savor the Harvest, David and Lisa in Illinois, and Jen in Maryland. We also have It's Not 5 o'clock and We Don't Care listeners. Thank you to Meg in South Dakota, Clay in Arizona, John in California, Andrew in California, Aswani in California, Chantel in Ontario, Mary Lou in Pennsylvania, Kathy in Georgia, Chris and Janet in Colorado, Steve in Illinois, Kathy in Tennessee, Renee in Illinois, and our tastemaker listener, David in Scotland, and Carol in Kentucky. And not to be forgotten, our Wine-tastic listener, Laura.
And we just have a little bit more information. We put it in the blog, but we haven't given the appropriate shout outs on the show yet. But a little bit more about Jen in Maryland, and you'll see her picture in the blog, and you've probably seen her in the past blog. But she wrote in a little bit about how she first met. Well, she first met me in the military, and she was sporting premium denim, sharing cocktails, of course, and making mischief in Southern Pines, North Carolina. We've remained friends through life transitions, and Jen is now also a fan of the dynamic and fabulous Wine to Five duo. She's thrilled to support the podcast as part of Patreon, just as the podcast supported her budding relationship with her ridiculously good-looking and charming significant other, Andrew. The Wine to Five podcast makes for great listening over a weekly commute to see one another, and they've both enjoyed Wine to Five gals, keeping them company for weekend drives inspired by Val and Steph. Both Jen and Andrew are now Society of Wine Educators members. So again, we had a fun time with you guys. So that's a little bit more about Jen. And then we got a little bit about our newest It's Not 5 o'clock and We Don't Care listener, Renee. She says, my background is in healthcare administration. However, I currently work for a tasting room for Linfred Winery in Roselle, Illinois. It is one of the oldest wineries in Illinois. She has a level 3 WSET certification and will be taking the CSW in October. She looks forward to continuing on her wine education and her career and meeting other self-proclaimed wine geeks. So thank you guys so much for sending that in, and definitely check them out in the blog. As for connecting with us, we're here for you every week and in between episodes, and you can find us in the social spaces. We're here for you every week. We're here in between episodes. You can find us on the social spaces at the Wine to Five community on Facebook, and you can connect with Steph on Twitter, on Pinterest, on Instagram as the Wine Heroine. You can connect with me, Val, on Wine Gal Unboxed, Vina with Val on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. And Sebastian, before we hang up today, where can our listeners connect with you?
Well, you can check out my budding eye for photography on Flickr. So if you search for Sassy Italy Tours on Flickr, you can actually see a lot of shots of places that I like in Italy. You can find us on Facebook if you search for Sassy Italy Tours there. You can find us on the blog at sassyitalytours.com, and we're also on Twitter at sassyitalytours.com, or at Sassy Italy Tours, at Sassy Italy Tours. So we're definitely out there. So yeah, please do connect with us, and we just love talking about Italy. So if you just have general Italy related questions, just hit us up and let's just start talking about Italy, because there's nothing better to talk about.
Oh, yep. Cheers to that. I love that too. So let's end on that note.
Yes.
Right on.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening to the Wine to Five podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook/WineTWO5 and tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.